Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I'm delighted to be joined once more by Tom Irving. Tom, how are you?
I am not too bad. A bit hungry, but I think I'll survive. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. The reason I am we're recording this 5 minutes later than planned was because I made myself a pancake. So that's me uh, getting on top of my hunger, but only prolonging yours. So I won't keep you long though. We are here to discuss Michael Steinwender. He became Heart Midlothian's latest signing in the January transfer window, the third acquisition, signing a deal until the summer of 2028. He could be joined soon by a Norwegian midfielder. We might touch on him right at the end, just because I've watched a bit about him, talked to a couple of folks. But before we jump into it, Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor Heart Standard and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even OASIS tickets. Get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com and enter your chance to spread the good vibes. Now, Tom, we are not recording this live like we did with the Kabangu one, I think. We are recording this just before your analysis piece on Steinwender goes up. You've had that written for a wee bit as the deal progressed, and I'll put these out at the same time. So if you're listening to this the content, the article's already on heartstandard.co.uk, so you can read it while you listen to us go on. But what I was going to do, I've confused because I was looking at the wrong bits of notes, but the way you've written it is really interesting, just in terms of when you share a bit of wisdom that you got given from a scout when you got into the recruitment side of things, or the recruitment game, as you said. Going back to your first impressions of Steinwender, what were your initial takeaways? Because I think one of the first things that you do, and I would imagine most analysts do, is they'll look at the data before they will go in and look at the player.
Yeah, it depends, I guess, where I am when I hear about it. If I'm out on my laptop, I'll do something different to if I'm on my phone. It all kind of depends what I've got available and what I can be bothered doing initially, because looking at the data takes a little bit more brain power than it does just watching some videos and stuff. So yeah, there's kind of three ways. I'll either look at, if it's a league I don't know much about, I'll look at the league comparison, just to quickly understand, how good this level is. But the Swedish league, I think we know a fair decent amount about it. And then I'll either watch footage or, look at the data. In this case, I can't remember what I looked at first off the top of my head. I think it was the data I looked at first. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the data I looked at first on this occasion. I don't know.
I've put up. Hold on, I'll remove this daft thing. There we go. So I've put up the data of Michael Steinwender. This is from his time in the Swedish top flight with Värnamo. This is something you include in the article. But what were your before you got into watching him? What were your initial impressions?
Yeah, so looking at the data, it's very encouraging from a defensive side of things, apart from those two metrics at the top. And I'll go into that a little bit later. And then from the possession stuff, which is a bottom kind of half of the table, it's okay. It's nothing special. But when you look at where Värnamo are in the league, they were, I think it was third bottom. I think it was something like 3 points off relegation. So they were very, very down low in the league. And usually, well, just if you think about the types of teams we see in Scotland at the bottom of the league compared to the types of teams we see at the top of the league, centre halves are much more likely to lump the ball long or just get rid of it. Whereas if you look at the teams towards the top of the league, even the defenders are much more likely to keep hold of it and play from the back. And that's not saying there's not good ball playing defenders at the lower end of the league. It's just they might not have the players around them. They don't trust their centre midfielder to be able to take the ball and do something with it. So they'll just go long. They might get pressed by the likes of, Celtic, Hearts, etc. And just want to go long with the ball instead of risking it in the back. So
they're asked by the coach not to play.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So looking at the possession data, so it's one of these situations where I don't think the data tells the whole story. With the possession data, it's okay. It's pretty good for a player, a centre back down that part of the league. And looking at defensive data, now you're expecting centre back at one of the lower teams to be involved in more duels, and being involved in more defensive activities, which he was for the most part. We look at the defensive duels and the defensive duels one part. So that's a defensive duel is basically like attack, or in a situation where they're in a little battle with someone. So when we look at that data, it stood out to me. So I actually went and looked at his defensive duels on Scout, and I was expecting to see, a lots of poor decisions or just something that showed this data that we see here. But he's actually pretty good with those activities, with those metrics, which really surprised me. The one thing that I noticed when I watched him, I think he's intelligent. He's a really strong defender. He knows when to put a foot in, when to stand up a player, which I really liked. The only thing I would say is a negative from his defensive side of things is he's not the quickest in really short, sharp bursts. But I guess no central defenders are really. They're not expected to be agile like wingers. He's potentially slightly slow on that end, but not in a way where it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. But that could be the reason for his kind of lower involvement and lower percentage of success rate for those defensive duels. But yeah, I feel like the data kind of gives a good idea of what he's like as a player. Yeah.
And I'll remove this just now. Move the right one, not you. So you looked at the data, and then you looked at the kind of process seemed to be data, then clips of him, and then you watched him in action in a full game. What did you learn more about in terms of watching him in a game rather than just like the data and just wee clips here and there?
Yeah, so I've got a different kind of process for the small clips I look at compared to other scouts I've chatted to. I think I do it a bit differently. I like to look at a few separate metrics. I like to look at if it's a defender, defensive duels, maybe aerial duels, and find with centre backs, you see when you look at like all of their actions, you see lots of little small passes and stuff. So I like to look at accelerations and dribbles to see what he's like, kind of driving with the ball and stuff, and seeing how his close control is and stuff. And I get a good idea of what to expect watching a game when I do that. So yeah, I looked stuff like that, and then watched him in the full game. Watched him against Malmo, who, if you don't know, they won the league by quite a significant distance. It was something you'd expect to see this season, probably with Celtic and Rangers. It was maybe like 15 points, I think. So yeah, top of the league on a canter against third bottom of the league. I was expecting him to look rubbish, basically. And I like watching these games where he's going to be challenged because it's a bit more realistic to, can he go up a level? Is he going to look out of place playing against these better teams? But he wasn't at all. I was really pleasantly surprised by how much of an all-round central defender he was. So initially, his physicality stood out to me. He's quick. Apart from short bursts, sometimes he like the mid to long range runs. He's speedy. He can get up to a high top speed. Saw that tracking back, chasing balls on the top. He was always able to catch up with quick players or overtake quick players, which was great. Kind of physically, strength wise, he's a big boy. I can't remember the exact height, but he's
6'3".
6'3". There we are. And from a kind of physicality side, I think Johan Mjällby was quoted somewhere saying he's not strong or something. I can't remember what the exact quote was, but it was something kind of questioning his physicality. Now, he's not the kind of centre back like Rubezic at Aberdeen, who is just going to put his head through every wall that he sees. He's a strong physical player, but not overly aggressive, I think. So I don't think he's going to struggle with the physical side of the game, but I don't expect us to have him sent off or booked a lot of time for reckless tackles. He's strong but fair, which was good. I like to see that. Shows a bit of intelligence about him as well, which is good. Going on to the kind of defensive things, I really liked. So he had a few good things. His anticipation was kind of brilliant all round. Whether it be knowing where to be in the box when a cross comes in, he seemed to always get his head on the ball to clear it. Quite a lot of time at the front post, he was the first man blocking a cross coming in. And just like what I said about Cabangu, I said Cabangu knows exactly where to be in the box. Mm-hmm. It's the exact opposite. Well, the exact same, but on a defensive side. He knows exactly where to be on the defensive side. So it'll be interesting if we could watch them in training. I feel like it'd be a good little battle there. Another thing I like defensively is he stands up players, and he's good at knowing kind of when to put a foot in to win the ball. There was loads of little I don't know what to call it off the top of my head. Just, I guess, a standing tackle, but just stealing balls away with just a little toe poke and clearing the ball, which was really good to see. In the air, he was really, really good in the air, winning lots of headers and physical challenges. Quite a few times we had, again, his anticipation showing as well, where a long ball would come up the pitch and he would get in front of the centre forward and kind of steal it away. So not just winning balls in the air like headers, but getting in front and kind of intercepting the ball / winning it in the air, which again is good to see. And there was this one situation that I really liked. Again, it showed his intelligence. Ball was coming over the top, and he noticed that him or the player in front of him wasn't going to get it. It was going to go over him to another defender / striker who were going to battle for the ball. And instead of either standing or potentially going for the ball and probably missing it, he took a step back, and the centre forward that he was marking jumped for the ball, missed it by a mile. He had taken a step back and he just turned and went away with the ball. So yeah, lots of good anticipation and intelligence when it comes to a defensive side of the game.
One of the things that stood out in your piece for me was almost kind of leadership qualities. I think I can put that in the headline, in that he was, despite being 24, and now I'm playing in a new team in a new country. And this is something that he actually mentioned in his Hearts TV interview that went out just before we recorded this. He spoke a lot. You said he spoke a lot. He communicated a lot with his fellow defenders and teammates.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really hard about video scouting. Every scout that does video scouting predominantly, you'll struggle to find who's talking and what kind of communication. But it was very evident that he was one of the people that talks a lot, that commands his teammates, which if you can see from a video with not the best sound and 20,000, 30,000 fans shouting, then you'll probably notice it in the stadium as well when you're watching them live. Always talking, always using his arms, pointing, giving instructions, which is good to see. I think Hearts maybe lack a few leaders like that. We've got Shankland and Gordon as our main captains, but I don't think they do enough to lead players on the pitch. I've been a big people slag me for this. I've been a big advocate for Devlin to be a future captain of the Hearts, because if you watch him, he's always talking, he's always encouraging, he's always picking someone off the ground, and I think that's something that we're going to get from I'm going to butcher the name, Steinwender.
I'll go Steinwender. But so you look at Gordon and Shankland strike me as kind of follow leaders, or like set an example, like that's how they just kind of do, like their actions do the talking, whereas the two most vocal players in the Hearts squad certainly on the pitch be Frankie Kent and Cabby Devlin. I think, and they're kind of your more stereotypical people look on and think, they're kind of leaders, but people can obviously lead different ways. But I think it's really encouraging, like you said, about just having guys in there who, the fact he's comfortable to come in and just talk and just have that place in, which is really, really encouraging. Before I move on to the next question or two, I just thought I would add this to the stage. People who are listening to this podcast can't see it, but this is basically the Opta rankings. Tom mentioned it earlier on. Just it gives you a decent view of how teams in Sweden compare against teams in Scotland. So Celtic and Rangers are ranked 1 and 2, and then the next 9 teams, I think, are all Swedish. And then you've got Hearts, and then Värnamo, who Steinvender's coming from, are ranked between Hearts and Aberdeen, and then with a lot of other Scottish clubs below. And then I'm going to add the Steinvender's. Can you talk about this briefly? Tom, I've put on, so for those listening don't have not on the video, it's basically, I think it's Steinvender's his data compared to the average Scottish centre back. Yep.
So when I was initially looking at his data, I was kind of questioning some of the data. After I watched him, I was kind of questioning some of the data. So I kind of compared what his data would look like if his numbers were compared to all other Scottish Premiership players instead of players in his own country. And we see a few things, like, for example, in Sweden, his 4.97 aerial duels per game is a lot, but in Scotland, it's pretty poor, which isn't a bad thing. It just shows that the ball is much more likely to go long in Scotland in comparison to Sweden. But his aerial duels won is still high on both sides. So even though he's not involved in as many duels in comparison to Scottish players, he has still got a really good success rate, which is good. The other things that stood out were his possession data. If you look at his possession data compared to Scottish players, he's much better, which makes me think that centre-backs in Sweden are much more likely to play football instead of lumping the ball long. His accuracy and his percent amounts of passes per game look much better when you're comparing them to players in the Scottish Premiership and then players in Sweden, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on where you see him fitting in, I did just take it. It's a simple fitting into a back four where he can play as the right-sided centre back.
I think the game I watched, as you can imagine, playing against the best team in the league, they set up with kind of like a 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, however you want to look at it. So he was actually I think he was a central defender. Off the top of my head, I think he was the central of the 3 centre backs, perfectly fine in there. Sometimes he drifted out to the right, sometimes he drifted out to the left. I think he's going to be able to play anywhere, really. I think he'll be a good centre back in a back 4, or good centre back in a back 3. And I don't think he looked like he was comfortable on both feet. He was really comfortable in possession. He just looked calm all the time. He didn't look panicky when he had, a player worth probably 10 times what he's worth running at him. He was always calm, was happy to take the ball down, maybe turn with it, and find a pass. So I don't think there's going to be any issue if he's asked to play right centre back, left centre back, or if he's asked to play, in a back 4. I think he'll be fine anywhere, really, to be honest.
No, that is good. And yeah, because it's remember reading, I think it was Craig's profile piece, just kind of like who is Michael Steinwender. And I think when he signed, I don't know if it was for Bolton or Mattersburg, they talked about him as being able to play fullback, but very much he has been signed as a centre back, but it does give that flexibility to play in a back 3. Before we finish up, we just wanted to touch on Sander Kartum, the Austrian midfielder that Hearts are closing in on. He is 29-year-old from Brann. I think he's going to be he's travelling to Edinburgh potentially the next 24 hours ahead of a move that could be 6 figures. Before I talk about him, Tom, just from what I've seen, what have you looked into him any yet? I know you're potentially going to be writing a piece for us on him, but have you had any initial impressions?
I've not had a huge amount of time to look into him a lot. What I have seen, I've kind of done the first start of my process, mostly looking a little bit at the data, but mostly looking at clips of him playing. A couple of things that stood out to me was where he's pretty tenacious, where he seems really hardworking and kind of just happy to be there, and happy to work hard for the team. Not as effective as the likes of Cammy Devlin, but I think he'll work well and getting around the park and pressing players. And then in possession, he was quite interesting. I don't think he's not Lionel Messi. He's not going to beat 80 players and put the ball in the top corner, but he's really comfortable in possession. He had a decent range of passing, and what I liked is he always looked forward when he was on the ball. It wasn't get the ball, go backwards. It was, can I find a forward pass? And that's probably, if you ask Hearts fans, what the issue is in our centre of midfield is looking forward when we got the ball. So yeah, I think hopefully that's what we're going to see. Hopefully that's what I'm going to write about as well. His range of passing going forward, opposed to keeping the ball and keeping possession.
Yeah, I've had access via the Wisecout 2's games against St Mirren. So he played in both legs of the Conference League qualifier against St Mirren earlier this season, and he played on the right of a midfield three and straight away looked very, very neat and tidy, really good left foot. He got into a lot, I think over the 2 games, he got into 5 decent shooting opportunities, went close on 3, maybe 4, even 4 occasions with long-range shots. He is a late developer. This will be a piece that's going up tomorrow. I spoke to someone in Norway about him, and I spoke to a Brann fan on social media as well, and he was basically at times last season the 12th man for Brann, and then they sold Nielsen to Aberdeen, and then he became a regular in the team as they kind of tweaked the midfield, and he helped them finish second in the Elite Series, which qualified Brann for the Champions League qualifiers. Unfortunately, Sander, you're not going to go in the Champions League qualifiers of Hearts, certainly not this season. But he does seem to be quite an experienced guy. And you mentioned just about his tenacity, and that's one thing that both the people I've spoken to was that he is very comfortable in a high intensity pressing team. And we've seen it with under Critchley that I think he wants the team to be quite intense, especially at Tynecastle when the team lose the ball. He definitely can tick that box. Probably the most interesting aspect will be where he fits in, because I think he does bring a bit of flexibility that he can play on the right of a midfield three if Critchley goes for it. Critchley's tended to play with a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2, but 4-4-2. I think he could do a similar job to Spittle, but on the right hand side, being quite narrow. And one of the guys spoke to said, or I think both mentioned that he could fill in at number 10 as well and look good there if it's a 4-2-3-1, which again certainly was an issue when we went to Aberdeen, and kind of Grant's certainly much more of a number 8, so he does provide a bit of that. Now there was my initial impressions when watching him, there was bits where I was thinking he's quite Andy Irving, and there's other bits where he kind of reminded me just of his style of Oliver Bozanic. So it'll be interesting to see how he is viewed by Critchley and how he's used, providing the deal goes through, of course. But it does provide the team with probably something a wee bit different in midfield. You kind of mentioned it, but you look at it where Devlin's brilliant at winning the ball back. Boateng's good at that as well. You've got kind of Benny and Macaulay Tate who are really good at keeping possession and just being at the base of midfield. And then you've got Grant as well. He's tidy on the ball, can play. He's probably a bit more vertical with the possession. And then Neuenhoff is a bit more energetic, a bit more for number 8. So he gives you a bit of all of that, but maybe a bit of more of a attacking intent. So yeah, definitely an interesting signing, because you look at him, straight away you don't think he was going to be the profile that the team were going to be looking at signing under Jamestown.
Yeah, and that I was speaking to my mates and trying to compare, who he's most like or who he's maybe here to replace in the Hearts team, and I don't think he's like any of the players we've currently got. I said probably most like Hoff in the fact that he's good, he's tenacious, he's good defensive, but he also gets forward. But I don't think he's very similar to Hoff whatsoever. It was just the only kind of slight comparison. So yeah, I don't think he's anything that we've got so far, and I think he'll be something different. And like you said, I think he could fill in that right hand side role in a kind of opposite Spittle. Unless we bring in a Kazakh winger, which is I'm really hopeful for.
I think we all are.
But yeah, I think he'll be a really interesting signing, and I'm looking forward to watching him play in the next 24 hours and writing something up about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll be able to read that on, everyone will be able to read that on heartstandard.co.uk. And in terms of other transfer business, I do think, I would imagine there will be, the club will still be looking to add a winger, whether it's Chesnokov or not, we're unsure. And I can't see too much being done beyond that. But again, that kind of probably depends on players going out the way as well, because it's still a big squad. And I would imagine in the final, how many days we've got left? Just under 2 weeks, that there'll be a few potentially going out, whether it's on loan or permanent. But yes, we will leave it there. Tom, thank you very much for that insight. I'm sure you'll be back on very, very shortly. Not shortly as in today, but shortly within the next week or so. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Do check out the piece. I've put it in the description below. If you're on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, go on to heartstandard.co.uk. You can subscribe if you've not already done to read the piece and get access for 4 months for just £4 or a year for £18. Or you can subscribe to YouTube for free. But yes, that's me. Enough of shameless plugging. I will say goodbye now, and I'll speak to you again later on in the week.